There's a voice that speaks, but not with words. A voice you can only hear in silence. It calls to the deepest part of your soul, beyond thought, beyond ego, beyond illusion. This is the voice of the silence. The sacred path revealed by Helena Blavatsky, not for the curious, but for the truly awakened. If you feel it calling, then this message was meant for you. The voice of the silence, part 1, the inner calling. Before the soul can see, the harmony within must be attained, and fleshly eyes be rendered blind to all illusion. Have you ever heard a gentle whisper within, one that does not come from the mind, but from a deeper, quieter place inside your being? This is not imagination. It is the voice of the soul, a sacred murmur that calls the seeker to awaken, to remember who they truly are, and begin the journey toward inner truth. The voice of the silence, written by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, is not just a book. It is a guide for the soul, a sacred transmission from ancient esoteric teachings once preserved in the East, now revealed to those ready to listen. It begins with a powerful message. These instructions are for those ignorant of the dangers of the lower path, yet determined to climb to the heights. What does this mean? It means the path to higher consciousness is not for the curious. It is for the courageous. For those who have seen the illusion of the material world and who long for something more, not fame, not power, not possessions, but truth. In this first part, Blavatsky introduces us to the inner calling. She tells us, before you can walk the path, you must become the path. That is, you must transform yourself completely, not superficially, but in the depths of your being. This is not a path of comfort. It is a path of fire. And yet, it is the only path that leads to real peace. The illusions of the outer world. The teachings begin with a cleansing of perception. The world we see with our eyes is not the real world. It is Maya, illusion. Our senses deceive us. Our desires distract us. And our mind tricks us into believing that the temporary is eternal. Blavatsky writes that the seeker must close the outer ear and open the inner ear. Only when we silence the noise of the world, the opinions, the fears, the endless chatter, can we begin to hear the sacred voice that speaks from within. This is why silence is so essential. Not just physical silence, but mental silence, emotional stillness, the complete alignment of body, mind, and soul. Only in that silence can the light of the soul begin to shine through. The first steps of the path. Blavatsky speaks of 3 great stages in the path of spiritual awakening. 1. The hearing, when the teachings are first received. 2. The reflection, when the seeker meditates and contemplates these truths. 3. The realization, when the truth is no longer just an idea, but a living force within. To walk this path, you must let go of who you think you are. You must release your attachment to your name, your story, your possessions, your beliefs. Not because these things are bad, but because they are not you. The true self is deeper, vaster, and eternal. It cannot be seen with the eyes nor grasped by the intellect. It can only be experienced in silence. As Blavatsky writes, kill out ambition, kill out desire of life, kill out desire of comfort. Work as those work who are ambitious. She invites us not to reject life, but to purify our motives, to serve, not to seek reward, to love, not to possess, to give, not to control. The spiritual warrior. The seeker becomes a spiritual warrior. Not one who fights with weapons, but one who conquers the lower nature with wisdom, compassion, and inner discipline. Blavatsky describes his battle not as external, but internal. The enemy is not outside. It is within pride, fear, doubt, and desire. To overcome these, the seeker must cultivate, Discrimination, to see what is real and what is false. Detachment, to remain unmoved by praise or blame. Compassion, to walk not for oneself, but for the good of all beings. A sacred invitation. This first part of the voice of the silence is a sacred invitation. An invitation to remember who you are beyond this body, beyond your past, beyond this world. To begin walking the path of the soul, the path of truth, of silence, of inner light. It is a path few walk, but it is the path that leads to the only true freedom, the freedom of the awakened soul. If you feel this call in your heart, even faintly, it means you are ready. Not ready in the sense of having all the answers, but ready to begin listening. Listening not with your ears, but with your soul, because the voice of the silence is always speaking. The question is, are you still enough to hear it? The voice of the silence, part 2, the two paths. Thou canst not travel on the path before thou hast become that path itself. In the sacred silence of the soul, once the seeker begins to awaken, a choice must be made. Not a choice of destination, but a choice of intention. Helena Blavatsky, through the ancient wisdom of the voice of the silence, reveals the existence of two spiritual paths, each leading in very different directions, though both noble in their own right. These are not physical paths, but inner journeys, paths of the soul, and each reveals the heart of the seeker, the path of liberation. The first path is known as the path of liberation, the way of the Arhat, the realized being who seeks nirvana, the great liberation from the cycle of birth and death. This is a path of silence, solitude, and supreme stillness. It is a path of personal awakening, of leaving behind the world, the desires, and even the sorrows of humanity. The Arhat reaches a mountaintop. He sees the truth. He dissolves into the great ocean of the one life. No longer bound by karma, no longer pulled by the currents of the world. It is a noble path. It is the path of peace. But it is not the only path. The path of compassion, the way of the Bodhisattva. The second path is higher, not higher in status, but higher in sacrifice. It is the path of the Bodhisattva, the soul who, upon reaching the gates of nirvana, chooses to turn back, not because they have failed, but because they love. Blavatsky writes, "The selfish devotee lives to live. The brother of mankind lives to bless." The Bodhisattva renounces the peace of personal enlightenment to remain among humanity, to suffer with them, to guide them, to lift them, until all beings are free. This is not martyrdom. It is not pain for its own sake. It is the deepest expression of awakened love, compassion made divine. The Bodhisattva becomes a light in the darkness, a silent guide, a humble teacher, a servant of the soul of humanity, the meaning of true greatness. In today's world, greatness is often measured by how much we achieve or accumulate. But in the voice of the silence, greatness is measured by how much we give, how much we love, and how much of the self we are willing to surrender for the good of all. The Bodhisattva does not preach. They embody truth. They do not seek followers. They awaken leaders. They do not cling to form. They live in essence. Blavatsky teaches that the highest beings are not those who flee the world, but those who dwell in it with an awakened heart, the deep waters of selflessness. To choose the path of compassion is not easy. It requires a destruction of the personal ego, the illusions of separateness and control. It requires patience when others misunderstand, humility when others attack, and hope when all seems lost. The Bodhisattva walks among the suffering, not because they must, but because they choose. Their joy is in service. Their purpose is in love. Their mission is to awaken others to their own inner light. This is the path of the silent watchers, the unseen guides of humanity who work from behind the veil. This is the path of Christ, of Buddha, of the great avatars, and it is open to every soul who chooses love over liberation, the inner decision. As the seeker walks the path, there comes a moment of stillness, a moment where one must choose not what is easier, but what is truer. The voice of the silence does not command. It whispers, "Choose, O disciple, whether thou wilt merge with the all, or stay to help those still wandering in the night." In that sacred moment, the soul sees clearly. To awaken is not the end. To love is the real beginning. This is the heart of the voice of the silence. It is not a teaching of escape, but of engagement, of staying, of serving, of becoming a living bridge between heaven and earth. And if you feel that deep stirring in your heart, the call to guide others, to walk with compassion, to lift even one soul from suffering, then perhaps this path is yours too, not by force, not by duty, but by love. The voice of the silence. Part 3. The inner temple. Thou shalt not let thy senses make a playground of thy mind. As the seeker advances on the sacred path, there is a realization that dawns like the rising sun. The true temple is not built with hands. It is not found in stone walls or sacred books. It is built in silence within the soul itself. In this part of the voice of the silence, Helena Blavatsky speaks of a holy sanctuary hidden deep within every human being, a place untouched by time, unshaken by the world. It is the inner temple, and it can only be entered through purity. The fire of purification. Before the soul can step into the sacred space, it must pass through fire. Not physical fire, but the fire of transformation. This is a fire that burns away illusion, ego, fear, desire. It is a fire that consumes the lower nature, so the higher self may rise like a phoenix from the ashes. Blavatsky writes, "Strive with thy thoughts unclean before they overpower thee. Use them as thy servants, not as thy masters." This is a powerful teaching. It tells us that the mind must be mastered, not silenced by force, but disciplined with love. Thoughts, when undirected, become chains, but thoughts, when aligned with the soul, become wings. The true seeker learns to cleanse the mind, the heart, and the inner motives, not through repression, but through awareness and devotion. The garden within. Imagine your inner world as a garden. When you are unaware, it becomes overgrown with weeds, the weeds of fear, comparison, attachment. But when you begin to walk the path, you become the gardener of your soul. You begin to pull the weeds. You plant seeds of stillness, compassion, clarity. You water them with meditation. You give them sunlight through daily acts of kindness. Slowly, the garden transforms. It becomes a place of peace, a place where the voice of the silence can speak to you clearly. This is not poetry. This is the deep science of the soul, preserved by the ancient sages and gifted to us through Blavatsky's hands. The mind as a mirror. The teachings explain that the mind must become like a still lake, free from ripples, so it may reflect the light of the spirit. When the mind is agitated, confused, or full of desire, it distorts everything. But when it is quiet, when it becomes pure and undisturbed, it reflects the divine like a mirror reflects the sky. Blavatsky speaks of this as a sacred alchemy. The lower self is not destroyed, but transmuted, transformed into a vessel for the higher. Your mind becomes your instrument. Your body becomes your temple. Your life becomes your offering. Building the inner temple. To build the temple within, the seeker must live in constant self-awareness. Not self-judgment, but loving observation. Every thought is a brick. Every action is a beam. Every choice is a sacred gesture. The voice says, "Thou canst not build a temple, unless thou buildest it with pure thoughts and unselfish acts. This is the path of conscious living, of aligning your inner world with the eternal truths, of realizing that spirituality is not escape. It is presence, devotion, and transformation in every moment. The silence that speaks. When the inner temple is built, something miraculous happens. The silence that once seemed empty becomes alive. It begins to speak, not in words, but in knowing, not in sound, but in vibration. The voice of the silence is not a voice you hear with your ears. It is a voice that resonates in your heart, that guides your actions, that fills your soul with sacred certainty. It whispers, "You are not the passing self. You are not the roles you play. You are the eternal flame within, unchanging, unborn, undying." This is the heart of part 3, the great preparation of the soul. The seeker becomes a temple. The silence becomes a teacher. And the sacred journey becomes not a destination, but a state of being, a state of peace, a state of purity, a state of oneness. The voice of the silence. Part 4, the union with the One. Thou art now ready to enter the path that leads to the eternal light, the true light that burns without a wick or fuel. At the end of the path, beyond the fire of purification and the silence of the soul, lies the final step, not the end of the journey, but the return to the source. This is the moment when the seeker becomes the knower, when the drop realizes it is the ocean, when the soul dissolves the illusion of separateness and merges with the one life that pulses through all things. In the voice of the silence, Helena Blavatsky shares this sacred mystery with reverence and awe. You are not becoming divine. You are remembering that you always were, the light that has no name. The ancient sages speak of a light that blinds ordinary eyes, a light so pure, so real, it cannot be described in words. It is the light of the Absolute. It is not a light you see, it is a light that is. When the seeker reaches this point, there is no more struggle, no more doubt, no more desire. There is only union. All things are seen as one. The veil of duality, good and evil, self and other, life and death, falls away. And in its place, there's only truth. Blavatsky calls this the voice that speaks in silence, because it is beyond language, beyond thought. It is a direct experience of being everything and nothing at once, beyond the mind, beyond the self. To enter this sacred state, the seeker must go beyond the mind, not to destroy it, but to transcend it, to reach that still center from which all creation emerges. This is the moment when the personal self, the I, the ego, the separate identity, is gently released. You do not lose yourself. You find yourself, the real self, the timeless presence, the eternal spark that was never born and never dies. When the disciple is ready, the master appears. But here, the master is not outside you. The master is the light within you, awakened, eternal, and serene, the return with open eyes. And yet, even here, the journey does not end. The highest realization does not lead to escape. It leads to engagement with greater love. The true initiate, after tasting the eternal, returns to the world not to possess, but to serve, not to teach with words, but to radiate presence, not to escape suffering, but to uplift those still lost in the dream. Blavatsky writes, "Compassion is no attribute. It is the law of laws, eternal harmony. The awakened one becomes like the sun, always shining, never asking for anything in return, present in silence, acting through love, healing without effort, the soul's highest destiny." In the end, the voice of silence is not a doctrine. It is not a book of beliefs. It is a map of inner awakening. a reminder that the divine is not far, that the temple is within, that the path is walked in silence, in compassion, in truth. And above all, it reminds us, you are not here to chase the light. You are the light. So be still, listen, and when the silence speaks, do not fear its voice. It is the voice of your own soul, calling you home. If these words have stirred something within you, a memory, a longing, a sense of deeper truth, then honor that feeling. Follow it, nourish it, for it may just be the voice of the silence, calling you to awaken.